European Medical Writers Association for this session as part of our Careers Week. I'm going to hand over to you now, Abe.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jenna, for inviting me here. And hello, everyone. Good evening. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about medical communication. So more specifically, what I do, medical writing. So just a bit about me. So I'm an American, as you can probably tell from my accent, and I was a biologist. I worked over 15 years in basic research, and I had the good fortune at one period of time to have worked with a Nobel Prize winner. She won the Ada Yona won the Nobel Prize in chemistry in 2009 for solving the three-dimensional structure of the ribosome. And I moved later on to industry, where I worked for Schering and Bayer, and I became a medical writer working in clinical development, where I prepared a whole range of regulatory documents, which I'll be talking to you about now, and participated in submissions in different countries in Europe, Asia, and the United States, in different disease indications, so neurological diseases, cardiovascular diseases, oncology, hematology, ophthalmology, so quite a range. And I participated in successful marketing authorizations, which I'll go into and what that means, in chronic lymphocytic leukemia, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, hepatic cell carcinoma, macular degeneration, men's health. So I left industry in 2016 and became a freelance writer, where I have clients in pharma and in biotech. And the organization that I represent, EMWA, I've been a member there since 1996. I'm a past president and a workshop leader, which means I train other medical writers. And I'm a chair of the EMWA Ambassadors Program. It's an outreach program to address people like you, to tell them about medical writing and about EMWA. So just as a disclaimer, the thoughts and opinions expressed by me belong to me, and this presentation does not necessarily represent the official position of EMWA. So I've gotten that out of the way. So what is medical writing? So it is a form of communicating clinical and scientific data clearly and effectively to a wide range of audiences and in different formats and different types of documents. And there are two main types of medical writing. That's regulatory writing and medical communication, or medcoms, as people also call it. So if you're a strong communicator and want to use your scientific skills and knowledge, then this might be an area for you. So what is regulatory writing? So it's focused on the pharmaceutical industry and also in medical device industry. And the main audience are people performing clinical trials, government regulatory authorities, and also the lay public. And the idea for pharmaceutical companies in particular is to attain and maintain a marketing authorization. Marketing authorization is, in other words, a license to be able to market a drug, okay? And this is for new drugs or therapies or medical devices or other health products. So examples of the types of documents that you would write as a medical writer in regulatory writing. For instance, an investigator's medical product dossier. It's a very technical document which describes the chemical properties of a particular drug, how it's manufactured, how its quality is controlled, any type of experiments, testing that has been done in animals to determine its pharmacokinetic properties or its toxicology properties. And this is before a drug actually gets to be used in treating humans. You have to do this type of groundwork testing. So a clinical trial protocol. So this is basically a blueprint for how to carry out a clinical study. So a clinical study is quite a complicated process because you have different hospitals in different countries involved in practically treating the same patients, recruiting and treating the same patients, and they all need to do the same thing in the same way. They have to treat the same patients, they have to examine them in the same way, they have to give the drug in the same way. And this is all laid out in a clinical trial protocol. And a patient information sheet is something, of course, that a patient needs to read, understand, and sign before they can participate in a clinical study. An investigator's brochure, as its name implies, is for a head doctor in a hospital who's in charge of a clinical team helping to run this study. And they need all the background information about how the drug works, what its possible side effects could be, all the previous testing in the lab, and what other drugs there are, for instance, doing similar things. So that's the investigator's brochure. A development safety update report has to be submitted to the health authorities, usually yearly, and it gives all the information on the side effects of a particular drug from year to year. It has to be updated during the entire clinical development process. A study report, a clinical study report, this is a summary of all of the data that was collected during a clinical study about the efficaciousness and the safety of a particular drug. And a common technical document, this is not one document, but a summary of many documents encompassing thousands of pages. And this gives the health authorities a good idea of what the argument it is for giving a license for this drug. All of the information necessary for them to judge the efficaciousness and the safety of a drug. And of course, answering questions from the health authorities is also a job that's done by medical writers. So this slide just sort of gives you an idea of what clinical development is in a nutshell. I'll just take you briefly through it. There are different phases. So there's a preclinical phase, there's a clinical phase, and there's a drug marketing phase. And as I was telling you, in the initial phase, you have this investigator medical product dossier, which has to be filed with the authorities. They need to know what you plan to do. And then there's this clinical trial cycle, okay? So all of these different documents that I mentioned, in the investigator's brochure, and the clinical trial protocol at the beginning of the process, the informed consent form, these have to be done right at the beginning of this process here, as well as the development safety update report. At the end, you write the clinical study report, and depending on the results of this study, a company may decide to do new studies, perhaps in other groups, for instance, in pediatric studies, studies in children, depending on the results. And many of these documents will either be rewritten or updated, depending on what type of study they decide to follow. If they collect enough data doing these studies, at some point, a company may decide to submit for approval for a marketing license, what I've been talking about. So they need to prepare this common technical document, this CTD, as well as updating a risk management plan. And if they submit and they are lucky enough to get approval, a marketing authorization approval, a next phase comes into play, and this is the marketing and patient communication phase. So in this case, and this belongs to what I'm going to talk about, medical communication, where medical writers are involved in preparing abstracts and publications and posters and documentation for patient advice or for healthcare professionals, and other, also possibly they may need to plan post-marketing trials as well. And during this entire process, safety is of paramount importance. So I mentioned this DSUR, but there are other documents as well that have to be updated and filed with the health authorities through the entire life cycle of a particular drug. So medical communications, as I was mentioning, these are documents about new drugs and therapies. So this is after a drug receives a license, the word has to get out about this drug. So how does this happen? Well, there are agencies employing medical writers who write scientific manuscripts for publication in peer-reviewed journals. They prepare product monographs. They're preparing conference abstracts and posters and slideshows. There's educational material about various medical conditions, and this is for doctors, so healthcare professionals, nurses, as well as for patients and their families. Okay? So there are also training materials that have to be written for pharmaceutical company employees. Websites need different presentations for pharmaceutical companies. Patient groups, patient advocacy groups hire scientific writers to work for them. And of course also medical journalism for reporting on new treatments. So other less known areas where medical writers are involved are non-clinical areas, which I mentioned at the beginning, sort of toxicology, chemistry, manufacturing, and control, these special types of technical documents. Also health economics documents, these are important for instance, insurers to know about, enable them to decide whether they're going to reimburse patients for getting certain therapies. And there are also documents about medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. And there's also a demand for translations of clinical and scientific documents as well. So if you have a gift for languages, this might be an area that you could pursue. So good medical writing matters. So I'm talking about it, but other people in high-placed people are also talking about this. For instance, Janet Woodcock, who was a former director of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the United States, and she has said, we, the FDA, provide healthcare professionals and patients with the information they need to use medication safely and avoid errors. And all of these efforts require excellent medical writing. And representative from the European Medicines Agency, which used to be in London, is now in Amsterdam, Melanie Carr, has said, enthusiasm over good writing and sharing of ideas across the whole pharmaceutical spectrum benefits patients, the health community, and society at large. So, important things that medical writers are involved in doing. So preparing high quality regulatory documents are actually critical for health authorities to quickly judge the risks and benefits of any given clinical program. So things have to be written well, have to be well organized, have to come to the point. And this has implications for the cost of marketing a drug, because any delays due to bad writing or bad organization of a document will cause the health authorities to need more time to consider it. They may have a lot of questions in order to clarify things. So good writing will minimize that, okay? So in medical communications, why is this important? Well, doctors and healthcare professionals need to learn about new treatments, okay? And they get this information from reports of clinical trials, which are in peer-reviewed journals. They get information from pharmaceutical companies and medical device companies, and they attend symposia and presentations at these conferences. And also patients and their families and support groups also need to learn about advances in therapies, especially. So, and newspaper reporters get their information as well. News agencies, they need briefings on new therapies. So all of these documents are developed with the assistance of medical writers. So some qualifications that medical writers need. They need to be skilled at presenting complex scientific information clearly and logically to specific audiences. So they need to be knowledgeable also about ethical standards. Ethical standards are quite important, looking out for patient welfare, patients who will participate in clinical studies. And they need to be also very aware of what the latest regulatory guidelines are. So these are changing quite often. You need to keep abreast of the newest developments in the regulatory authorities. And medical writers do not work in a vacuum. They need to be excellent at coordinating, planning, preparing, reviewing, and finalization of documents. And I'll go into that in a bit. So where do medical writers work? Well, as I mentioned, the pharmaceutical industry, as well as biotech, medical device sector, medical communications agencies, contract research organizations. These are organizations that are hired by pharmaceutical companies to provide certain services like running clinical studies or writing reports. Journal publishing employs medical writers, medical translation companies, as well as different academic organizations, charities, as well as the journalism sector. So quite a large span of areas where medical writers work. So what skills and qualifications do I need to be a medical writer? Well, writing expertise. So good analytical skills. You need to be conversive with this material to be able to understand and analyze scientific data. And you need to be able to translate this into figures, tables, and text. So figures, so a picture says actually 1,000 words. If you have a good table, you get the idea very quickly, and you may not have to wade through a lot of text to understand a particular topic. Ability to present this scientific information clearly and effectively to specific audiences. So as I mentioned, it might be regulatory authorities who need to read what you write. You may need to address it to medical professionals, doctors, nurses, or you may need to address it to the lay public. So you need good writing and word processing skills and a good attention to detail. So it's very detail-oriented work, especially when you have to wade through hundreds of pages of tables and listings and spotting important points in all of these to be able to, to present and interpret the data. And most employers will ask potential employees to complete a writing test. And the type of test that they will give depends on the company and what type of work they're doing. So I mentioned scientific expertise, usually your first degree in life sciences, biology, biochemistry, physiology, chemistry is required. I've known people have a background in physics as well. Some employers require advanced degrees, an MSc or a PhD, or even at times an MD. So you need basically a good understanding of human biology, diseases, and their treatment. And you'll be expected to learn about specific therapeutic areas as you get involved in the work. You can't avoid it. And it's also part of the fun of the job is getting to learn about new areas. And also some medical writers enter the profession with backgrounds in language rather than science. So they're might be quite good at writing, but they need to have the ability to learn a lot of science. And document expertise is important. So writing to know about what required formats of all of these different documents that I mentioned. For instance, if you're going to write a manuscript for publication, being aware of the specific journal requirements, what they require for their publications, and also understanding the importance of ethical standards. And most employers will train you in all of these aspects as well. And right. So medical writers work usually in the pharmaceutical as part of interdisciplinary teams, also with people outside of their company. So they might work with medics, they might work with statisticians, different operative people. And you need to therefore be comfortable communicating with people from a wide range of backgrounds, and also different cultures as well. So might be working with people from China, from Japan, from different areas. And at the same time, you need to be a team player, see where you fit in, how you can help. You need to be well organized and be able to organize others. You need to have good time management skills, and you need to be able to plan effectively. So you need to know how long something takes, what it takes to get something done. And at the senior level, you quite often take ownership of a writing project, and therefore you'll be actually guiding the team to prepare a specific document. So how much can I earn as a medical writer? Well, we did a salary survey. EMWA did a salary survey in 2017, and we had a pretty good response. And so these are some of the figures for instance, the mean starting salary for someone with less than 2 years of experience. There's quite a large median, as you can see here. The upper level is usually for management level medical writers. So medical writers can also become heads of departments of other medical writers. Okay, and freelance medical writers, so this was basically the mean hourly income that freelance medical writers were reporting. So, and we also found out that medical writers who completed the EMWA Professional Development Program and got a certificate, actually on average were earning more than those who didn't. So that might be motivation to actually do an EMWA certificate. I'll talk about that in a minute. So some positive aspects of being a medical writer. Well, it's a challenging and stimulating working environment. So there's a lot to learn as a medical writer. It can be pretty exciting, especially when a new drug is coming out. A lot needs to be discussed. There's a lot of exchange between people. So there's always something new to learn. And that's part of the fun of the job, I think. It's well paid, as I showed you before. And I think there's a certain level of satisfaction being part of a team, especially, for instance, if the people you're working with actually succeeded in getting a marketing authorization. I mean, that's really quite a thing. So people break out the champagne bottles and celebrate if they get a positive response from the health authorities for drug licensing. So you have the opportunity to lead a group of multifunctional professionals. So these people may outrank you in the company, but on the other hand, you will be collaborating with them on this writing project and giving them guidance and telling them what you need from them and by when you need to them, and assisting in the planning of the writing project. So there's a lot to do. There's a significant level of project management as a medical writer in pharmaceutical industry. And the good work is recognized and rewarded. There are no real fixed salaries. There's quite a variation, as I showed you. And there's opportunities to travel. So pharmaceutical companies have branches in different parts of the world. You may have to work in different areas of the world, especially in these multinational clinical studies. Some negative aspects, to be fair. It is a challenging work environment and it can be stressful, okay? There are time pressure, there are tight timelines, time is money, and but you need to plan effectively in order to take everything into account. So there's always something new to learn, but there's a lot to learn at the same time. And this is something you need to take into consideration. And it's not always easy to lead groups of multifunctional professionals, especially in terms of dealing with difficult people and criticism. That's part of the job as well. But I think usually we are able to handle it. We develop soft skills in order to create a professional atmosphere, especially under stressful conditions. And, well, you have to consider that traveling, especially also these days, can be time-consuming and stressful as well. So what I'd like to talk to you now is about the organization that I represent, so EMWA. the European Medical Writers Association, and what their role is in setting standards for excellence in medical writing. So EMWA is a volunteer educational and networking organization, and we're run by our members and for our members, and we have a 9-member board of directors. So we have 1,200 members in 48 countries, 17 of which are outside of Europe. And we were founded in 1992, and we were originally a chapter of the American Medical Writers Association. That's a much larger organization in the US. And we became independent in 1997. So we're a non-for-profit association. We're committed to representing, supporting, and training medical communication professionals. So how does EMWA set standards for medical communicators? Well, we hold 2 conferences a year, one in Europe, one held in the fall, and one held in the spring. Up until now, of course, they've been in person. Now we are having our first virtual conference, actually starting the day after tomorrow. And at these conferences, we offer training workshops and symposia on special themes, with expert seminars and special interest groups in specific topics, which I'll go into in a minute. We also have special sessions for people who are new to the field, so getting into medical writing sessions, for instance, where you can meet with experienced medical writers and hear their story, how they got into medical writing, and getting tips about writing your resume, how to present yourself at an interview, for instance. And we had networking events, for new and experienced writers. And networking is really one of the best things about going to an EMWA conference, making friends, meeting people, and hopefully by next year we'll be able to do that again. But we've been experimenting now with this online networking as well this year. So we have webinars, at least 10 per year. I think that's on the increase now because of the general situation. And these webinars are of interest, topics of interest, so updates on regulatory guidelines and practical training. And these are free to our members as well. We publish a journal, 4 print issues a year, and on each issue is on special topics, and they're featured articles and columns. For instance, there's a column, Getting Your Foot in the Door, so stories about how medical writers got into medical writing. And the website is chock full of different references, reference works, and news about the industry, and about regulatory guidelines and tips regarding software, and there are also job listings, and there's a freelancer listing as well as company listings. So some initiatives that EMWA is involved in. Well, the trend these days is in openness. And openness means a lot of these reports that pharmaceutical companies are producing about new drugs and clinical studies has to now be posted on the internet, on specific websites, company websites or other ones. And you need, therefore, to be able to anonymize these reports so that patients' identities cannot be recognized. And this requires special kind of writing. And this core reference document, it's for clarity, openness, and reporting, E3 based, that's a special guideline about clinical study reports. It's sort of an encyclopedic document that how to write these types of reports in a way of smart writing so that these documents do not have to be redacted to mask the identity of patients, for instance. And it's been downloaded over 28,000 times up to now. So it's been quite useful. So I talked about these special interest groups, and they cover pharmacovigilance. So people meet to discuss the newest developments in different areas, like pharmacovigilance, safety, as I mentioned. This is paramount importance, and there's a lot being done and increasing regulation of this in terms of reporting. And I mentioned that this regulatory public disclosure, so posting a lot of information online for the public to be able to read about clinical studies. And there are special things that you need to know about medical devices, what type of writing this requires, what type of guidances there is to do this type of writing. Also veterinary medical writing, writing about animal medical studies. And medical communications in general, for instance, about predatory publishing. Predatory publishers, I'll mention in a bit, but they are unscrupulous websites that will publish anything without peer review, and we, as a medical writing organization, have written a position statement to inform other writers and especially also young scientists about these predatory practices. And we also have a special interest group on sustainability. So what medical writers can do in the digital environment to help preserve the planet. So we had a joint position statement on the ethical role of medical writers in preparing manuscripts for publication. So what's the role of a medical writer in preparing a manuscript, and what is the role of the people that they collaborate with, and setting ethical standards for these practices. And this statement has been translated in multiple languages, and it's been posted on our website. And I mentioned this predatory journals joint position statement as well, and this is also posted on our website and has also been translated into many languages. And it's a collaboration between the American Medical Writing Association and the International Society of Medical Publication Professionals. We also collaborate with an American group, they're called the Board of Editors in Life Sciences. They offer an examination which tests the proficiency of candidates in manuscript editing. If you pass this exam, which is not easy, you can get certification as an ELS, an editor in life sciences. And you can find out more about this exam at bells.org. Okay, so some future challenges that we have is being aware that we have more requirements for being transparent and posting a lot of things now on the internet for the health authorities and for the lay public. We now have, in this current situation, the need to develop new ideas for our conferences, so virtual conferences. And we have an increasing need to have online learning, so more webinars. And there's a challenge coming up in the use of artificial intelligence in drafting regulatory documents. And this has to do with some routine writing that a computer can be programmed to do and interpret tables, for instance. And there's an increased requirement now these days to simultaneously be able to write documents with multiple authors at the same time. So this collaborative drafting of documents is something that is increasingly important. And so then I would just like to mention, you're cordially invited to join our network. If you want any more information, you can look us up at EMWA.org. And we also have our head office is located in Macclesfield, and this is their telephone number, and you can contact them at info@emwa.org. And we are also active in LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. I'm open to your questions.